Olá, olá, eu sou o Rodrigo Polesso, fundador do Emagrecer de Vez.com e bem-vindo a mais um videocast, podcast aqui do site, ok? Onde a verdade tem sempre preferência do Aqui. E é o seguinte, hoje eu estou aqui com o Dr. Souto, que você já conhece, estou aqui com o Josh e também um convidado super especial que eu vou apresentar logo, tá? Assim, o Emagrecer de Vez.com está crescendo bastante, tá? Eu acho que as fronteiras nacionais já não são mais suficientes para segurar o conhecimento, tá? Então, você vai entender logo o porquê disso que eu estou dizendo. Então, os benefícios de uma alimentação correta, de uma alimentação saudável, como a gente fala no site, tá? E nesse videocast, podcast, eles vão muito além do imaginado pela maioria das pessoas. E os resultados são realmente impressionantes e muito notórios e duradouros, que também é importante, tá? Então, por isso, nós temos que gritar realmente o mais alto possível para que essas informações possam chegar à maior quantidade de pessoas possível, tá? E por isso, aqui no Emagrecer de Vez também, a gente está nos esforçando o máximo possível para trazer sempre o melhor, mais atual e mais verdadeiro conhecimento do mundo sobre nutrição e saúde. Então, hoje, tá, é um dia muito importante aqui para o Emagrecer de Vez, para o nosso videocast podcast, porque eu trouxe para conversar com a gente o Dr. Andreas Enfeldt, que é um médico famoso na Suécia, tá? E é bastante conhecido também mundo afora. Tá? Ele participa das principais convenções internacionais sobre obesidade, saúde, e também já entrevistou várias pessoas famosas da área, inclusive tá, o Gary Taubes também, que é autor do livro Why We Get Fat, do Good Calories, Bad Calories. Enfim, é uma pessoa realmente que eu admiro muito e venho seguindo o trabalho dele há muito tempo. E ele, muito gentilmente, concordou participar aqui no nosso videocast, tá? Só que assim, nós vamos hoje quebrar aqui vários mitos e discutir também formas de facilitar a vida de quem quer viver nesses modos de uma alimentação verdadeiramente correta, tá? E assim como o Dr. Andreas prega, assim como o Dr. Souto prega, e a gente prega aqui também no Emagrecer de Vez, ok? Agora é o seguinte, o Dr. Andreas, como ele é sueco, né, ele não fala português, infelizmente, mas não se preocupe que a gente vai colocar aqui legendas para que você possa seguir sem problema nenhum a nossa conversa. Agora, se você fala inglês, então não tem problema nenhum, você pode seguir tranquilamente, ok? Então agora eu vou mudar para inglês para que todo mundo comece, então, a discutir os assuntos de hoje que são bastante interessantes, ok? Então, ok. Now switching to English, finally, Dr. Andreas, now you can follow with us. Well, what we recommend and always discuss here on the website is incredible benefits of an intelligent, low-carb, lifelong diet for everyone that really wants to lose weight effectively and live better. But as we know, the modern so-called gurus and a lot of doctors and media and governments, of course, they're still spreading misconceptions and dangerous information as healthy guidelines. So therefore, I want to focus our conversation on myth destruction today here. We're going to put down a lot of myths. I think it's very important. The big ones, mainly, okay? So first of all, we know that carbs drive insulin, that drives fat, right? We know that short phrase. But carbohydrates are fattening, and we never ate so much carbohydrates in history, I think, in humanity, right? So saying that as an introduction, I want to start right away talking about this first big myth, which is carbs are required for any healthy diet. That's the big myth I want to talk about. We can talk about a bit of the science behind it. Is carbs, the way we eat today, really essential to a healthy diet? So I want to open discussions about it. I think you can talk a lot about it, but let's see what comes out. First of all, Dr. Andreas, welcome, and thank you very much for participating here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I want to know, well, now it's an open discussion, really. It's very informal, as we always do here. So the topic right now is the carbs are required for a healthy diet. I want to know your thoughts about this, or what you know about science about. Are carbs really required, essential for a healthy human diet? What do you think about it?
I would say no. I mean, carbs are optional. There's no essential carbohydrates. We can live fine without carbs, and if we no carbs, then our bodies are gonna use fat for energy, and maybe we need like 20 grams a day or something of carbohydrates, glucose, and the body can produce that from fat and protein. So we don't need carbs. It's an optional fuel.
Because the main argument, I think, a lot of nutritionists, they say that it is required because of the fact that the brain needs some glucose to work, right? So based on that fact, they imagine that we need to eat carbs so the brain can work. So what do you think about that?
Yes, it's a misconception. It's wrong. It's based on the fact that if you eat a lot of carbs, then the brain will burn glucose for fuel. It's going to burn like 120 grams a day or something. But if you don't eat that many carbs, then the brain will turn to an alternative fuel called ketones, which is manufactured in the liver from fat. So this whole idea that the brain needs carbs is just wrong. It's wrong.
And science has been showing that the brain actually works better on ketones, right?
Maybe for some people, maybe in some circumstances, maybe in most circumstances, I don't know, but it works fine at least.
Yeah, because I've read a lot of people tell that they just feel better, that their brain is just more mental clarity when they are on ketones.
Some people feel that, sure.
And Dr. Andres, you've put in your site a very interesting video of children playing with carbs and with a healthy snack, and their behavior is completely different. So actually, a lot of simple refined carbs may be bad for the brain, right?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, that is a controversial subject for sure, but a lot of people think so. I mean, a lot of people watch their kids on, drinking a lot of soda, eating a lot of crappy carbs, and they're behaving in one way, maybe not that great, and then they eat better food and they behave better. So possibly.
Yeah, I think what they observe in this experiment specifically they were talking about, that they fed a group of children with healthy snacks, and the other group of children they fed with like soda and typical party foods. And they observed that the behavior of the party food group was actually more like less stable, I would say. They were less concentrated, right? It seems like they have these peaks of high activity, and they are a bit more aggressive maybe, they talked about in the experiment. So I see this going up and down as a behavior that's usually common when you eat like this fast carbs, for example. What do you think about that?
I think the reason this is controversial is because in the 80s and 90s they did several experiments giving children sugar to see if they got hyperactive, and they didn't really. But the thing with these experiments is that the dose was kind of small. It's like one soda or something. And if you take kids to a birthday party, they don't just drink one can of soda. They eat a lot of stuff. So the question is, if they get more bad carbs, do their behavior get worse? And it could be.
Yeah, in a typical party, they get an overload of carbs, right?
Yeah, I think so.
The influence on their behavior may be controversial, but the influence on their health and their body fat status,
sure,
I think is uncontroversial, right?
It should be, yeah, it should be.
No, that's
Doctor, another common myth here in Brazil about ketones is about ketoacidosis. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's also a common myth that if you eat very low amount of carbs, your body is going to become acidic, and your pH is going to drop, and you're going to end up in the emergency room, based on this idea that you could end up in ketoacidosis, which is basically something completely different. It's connected to type 1 diabetes and a very, very severe lack of insulin. And you don't get that on a low-carb diet. You get something else called ketosis, which is a natural state for the body where the ketone levels in the body are very strictly regulated, so they don't get out of control like in the ketoacidosis state. So ketoacidosis is something that you could risk if you're a type 1 diabetic and you stop taking insulin. But it's not something you get on a low-carb diet. That is called ketosis. It's something else. It's just a natural state.
Yeah, very good to put it in very clear words. It's usually a subject that comes out. Yeah, that's true. I think that's a very good discussion for the carbs, because we have many myths to cover here today. So I just want to go forward, right? I think people are thirsty for information. So the next big one, maybe one of the biggest myths in the history of nutrition, I don't know, is that fat is bad for your health and bad for your heart. Okay, so first thing, when we actually suggest a low-carb diet and we tell people that, okay, you should eat more like healthy fats, you should really increase your healthy fat consumption. That means even saturated fat, of course, the natural fat. People open their eyes very wide, right? Because, I mean, saturated fat means bad things. I mean, everyone grew up with this conception. I did as well. It was a big thing. And it still is a very, very big thing. So the myth is, fat is bad for your heart and for your health. Now I want to open discussion about it. What do you think about it?
I think it's fine. Fat is fine. Natural fat is fine. Saturated fat is fine. I used to believe it too. I mean, I was trained as a doctor back in the 90s, and I was taught that saturated fat is bad because it raises your cholesterol, the cholesterol levels in your blood, and that's what's giving you heart disease. But it's not true. It's a theory that has been tested over and over again, and it's never been proven. There's been a lot of studies done where they take one group of people and they try to make them eat less saturated fat compared to another group that keeps eating like they used to, and there's never any difference, any significant difference in these trials. So it's a theory that has been tested for 60 years, and it always turns out to be false.
Yeah, in 2011 they had the great fat debate, right? And they concluded, I want to quote here, because I translated to Portuguese, I want to translate it back to English. They say, even though this paradigm that says that saturated fat causes heart disease have been spread so much during the last decades, the modern nutrition has shown no evidence to support this paradigm. And they say, in regards to the heart problems, there's the evidence actually suggests the opposite. They suggest a protective effect of saturated fat instead of what is actually told to people. So this was said in 2011 as a conclusion of the great fat debate, and I call it something that could be a conclusion, a scientific conclusion after like decades of studies about it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there was a paper, meta-analysis published in a very prestigious journal this spring called the British Medical Journal, and they looked at all the studies where you make people switch from saturated fat like butter to omega-6 polyunsaturated fats like corn oil or things like that. And if you look at all these trials, it's actually suggestive that the risk of heart disease goes up and not down. So meaning if you stop eating butter and eggs and you start eating a lot of plant oils like corn oil and safflower oil, you're actually going to increase your risk of heart disease, according to the best science there is.
It is appalling for me because, you know, a lot of nutritional studies, they are very bad in terms of design. They are retrospective, they are just correlational, but the one area that has been tested with the highest level of evidence is saturated fat, and it's definitely been proven that it's at the worst it is a neutral fat. It may not be great, but it's not bad for you. So this is beyond debate, and still the guidelines don't go with it. So it is appalling.
Absolutely, I think you said it right. I mean, it's a neutral fat. It's fine. It might not be the best thing you could ever eat, but it's certainly not the worst. I was talking to a very famous Danish scientist called Arne Astrup, a professor, and this spring, and he said the same thing, that saturated fat is the wrong thing to focus on, because there are so many things that are worse. I mean, rapidly digested carbs and sugar are definitely worse, and even polyunsaturated fat, if it's omega-6, is worse according to this new data. So it's in the middle somewhere. It's nothing to worry about, basically.
And I think Gary Taubes has done a wonderful job of summarizing the history of it. So we learned that the hypothesis came in the 50s and 60s, and the guidelines were put forward before the hypothesis was tested. And the hypothesis has been repeatedly tested many times, and it has refuted the hypothesis. Okay, the studies have refuted the hypothesis. So why it still is there? It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it just takes time to change one of these paradigms. It's going to take a few decades, perhaps, for some experts and so to retire, and new people to fill those committees and expert groups and all that.
Yeah, when we talk about fat, I think we need also to talk about cholesterol, right? After all, I think everyone thinks about cholesterol when you're talking about saturated fat, for example. And we still have reigning in our society today the ideas of Ansel Keys, right? Many decades ago, that the cholesterol that you eat, becomes a problem, and then you have like heart disease. So I want to talk about this thing. It is a myth as well, and it's very related to this fat myth. So the myth is that cholesterol in food, if you eat cholesterol through food, that's bad for you, it's bad for your heart. So I want to know what you think about.
Yeah, I think actually even Ansel Keys realized that that's just not right. That idea sort of lives on because I think it's too confusing for people to sort of say that, okay, this kind of fat is bad for you because it raises your cholesterol, but eating cholesterol is fine. That's going to confuse people, so they say that, saturated fat and cholesterol is bad for you. But saturated fat is not bad either. But eating cholesterol makes no big difference on the cholesterol levels in your body. If you eat more cholesterol, your body is going to produce less cholesterol, and it's
exactly. They say
most change much.
They say most of the cholesterol is actually manufactured by the body, right? So the cholesterol you ingest is not even close in quantity of the ones that is actually manufactured.
Yeah, and if it's so poisonous, why do our bodies produce it, right?
Yeah.
Why do we need it for life?
True, exactly. It's a very good point. And that people are usually very afraid of eggs, whole eggs. So when I say, okay, whole eggs are one of the most healthy things you can eat, but people are very, very afraid of it just because of this cholesterol myth, right?
Yeah, that's just sad, because eggs are very, very nutritious.
And you see a lot of people with these plates full of egg whites. It's boring to eat, it's tasteless, and it's not even as close as nutritive as a whole egg, right?
Sure, yeah. That's
It's sad to think about all the egg yolks that has been discarded throughout the years.
Yeah, oh my God.
You know what I tell my patients? Think about it. Once the embryo is in the egg in a chicken, it doesn't get any other nutrition from the chicken. So everything you need to raise a chick is in the egg. So it is possibly one of the most nutritious things you can eat. I mean, it has all the elements necessary to bring out a new formed life.
That's true. That's very true. It's good that we're talking about it, because I think these eggs, this myth behind the eggs, behind cholesterol, behind fat, is really, really strong. I would say it's the biggest myth ever, and it's very dangerous to believe in it, because maybe some people want to try a low-carb approach, and they want to, so they actually go for it, but then they have this problem in their head, so they end up lowering their carbohydrates ingestion, and then they don't replace it with another macronutrient, so they end up being hungry, eating lean protein and eating low-carb diet. So that's really not sustainable. It's never going to work, right? Because they're afraid to include healthy diets.
Yeah, I think that's the most common mistake people do when on a low-carb diet. They go on a low-carb diet and they're still eating low-fat, and that's basically starvation. And it's not sustainable. You're going to get tired, hungry, feel miserable, and stop. So if you're going to make low-carb work, you need to increase the fat in the diet.
And I just mentioned the very troublesome word, which is calories. That's a very interesting word, and that's another myth. So I'm going to go forward to the next myth, which is to lose weight, we got to count calories. that's what everyone recommends basically. If you want to lose weight, you should count your calories, you should spend more than what you eat, right? And that's a very deep discussion. I think we can have a very deep discussion. We're not talking about like physics, the first law of thermodynamics, because that always works, right? The first law of thermodynamics is always working, but that's not the point. I want to talk about the focus on calories. Do you think counting calories is actually needed to lose weight and improve your health? What do you think?
No, I think counting calories and restricting calories voluntarily is sort of a mild eating disorder. And I don't think it's necessary. No.
Do you think it could work long term?
I think for some people, but they're very few. I mean, if you restrict your calories, you're basically saying that you will eat less than you want, meaning you will have to stay hungry. And nobody likes to be hungry forever. So for most people, it doesn't work for a long time because they get tired, feel bad, and then they want to eat more and they give up.
Yeah, that's right. Not sustainable long term. But that's basically what nutrition is, and even doctors worldwide are suggesting to treat obesity, right?
Yeah, it's very sad. I think it's based on this idea that to lose weight you need to eat fewer calories than you expend, and that's, I mean, it's true in theory, but what they're sort of missing is that we do have this fantastic system for regulating hunger and how much we eat and how much we want to eat, and if this system is working, then we don't need to count. I mean, it's all, every animal in the world can eat as much food as they like, if they eat the kind of food that they're adapted to eat. So if you put a zebra on the savannah with a million tons of grass, they will never get fat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a lion and they have a million zebras to eat, they will never get fat. Because they don't want to eat more than the right amount.
Their appetite is going to be under control, I think, right?
Yeah. It's going to work, the hunger and satiety thing.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it helps, because we have been all so brainwashed with this manual calorie restriction thing, that it helps steer people away from this and think of, like, thirst, for example. I usually tell my patients, you have unlimited supply of water at your home. So why don't you drink 10 liters of water a day? Because it's basically free, right? And, well, I'm not thirsty. So the person starts to think out of the box, because for people it's just very hard to understand that hunger is just like anything else in the body. It's self-regulated, and it's being regulated, for millions of years, just as long as you don't tamper with.
It's like breathing. You don't need to have a chart specifying how many breaths you need to take depending on how much exercise you do and whatever. Just breathe when you want to. Same thing, right?
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, a few thousand years ago, they didn't have calculators to put on paper the amount of calories they needed. And I mean, it's a miracle, but we're here, right? Somehow humanity survived, and we have evolved to today. But one good example about it, it's very easy to overeat carbs, but it's not very easy to overeat nutritional food. So one example, in Brazil, for example, right, we have this churrascarias, which is a barbecue house. So people go there to eat a lot of meat, so they go there and eat a lot of meat. And then, but they can also go to another place when they can eat a lot of pasta, a lot of carbs in many forms, right? But if people usually know that when they go to this barbecue house and they eat a lot, they usually don't have even dinner if they went for lunch, right? Because they feel so satisfied. But now if you went to a cake buffet or something like that, or a pasta restaurant, you can notice very well that you become hungry again very, very soon. So carbs are very easy to overeat, and I think one of my theories is that your body wants nutrients. So if you don't give nutrients, you're gonna keep asking for more. Of course, we have other reasons like insulin, etc. But it's not nutrition. It's not nutritional, right? So if we eat like animal protein, like churrasco, which is barbecue in Portuguese, is animal protein, animal fat, you have a lot of nutrients there. So you feel more satisfied, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, our body will never have evolved a strategy to deal with a abundance of something that has always been scarce. It just makes sense. Okay, so if we had always access to meat or fish or, you know, wild fruit, we don't crave that as much as we crave sweets, because sweets were scarce. So I'm convinced that the only macronutrient that has potential for abuse is carbohydrates.
That's true.
Another curious thing is that I think the laws of thermodynamics are an oversimplification of what our bodies do, because there's so much more to that. You know, all the process that we evolved throughout the years to make our homeostasis.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to say you should eat less and you spend, but okay, that's true somehow, but you don't need to think about it. If you eat the right foods, you don't need to think about it, as Dr. Andreas just said. You don't need to think about how much you breathe. Your body just takes care of it, right?
Then another thing I think is important to focus on is that the advice that people usually get to lose weight, eat less, move more, it doesn't really work well. I mean, you test it in study after study. Most people lose weight for a short amount of time and then they regain. And if you compare this advice to eat fewer calories to the advice to eat fewer carbs but eat as much food as you like, then the advice to eat less carbs almost always wins, or it's a tie perhaps, but most of the time it's going to be a win. And the advice to eat fewer calories has never won a study comparing it to a true low-carb diet.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, another misconception is that you need to exercise to lose weight. So that's also suggested by nutritionists and doctors all over, right? They say, okay, you're going to lose weight, you should go to the gym, you should eat less. So you're going to starve yourself and you're going to find energy somewhere to actually go to the gym, exercise yourself. And that's what we see. So if you are a person that's obese or in fat, we know that science shows that you have a bad partitioning of energy in your body, right? So you have less energy available to spend in physical exercise. So it's really a very, very big challenge, I think, for a person that's overweight to exercise while they're in that condition, while still trying to eat less calories. I think it's absurd.
Yeah, and it's also been shown that exercise is not a very effective way to lose weight. You basically need to do it like they do in the Biggest Loser TV show, where they exercise maybe 8 hours a day or something while they're starving. I mean, obviously that's going to make you lose a lot of weight, but normal people who have jobs can't do that because we don't have 8 hours every day for exercising. People with a family can't do that. So it's not really possible to do it that way.
I mean, would you call that a lifestyle? I wouldn't call that a lifestyle.
It makes you feel miserable.
Yeah, you know, as Dr. Andreas has shown, you know, all comparisons of low carb versus low calorie studies, all comparisons have shown low carb to be better. But even if low carb was just as effective, you know, I would prefer not to be hungry all the time. So it comes to sustainability in the long term. You know?
Yeah, I always focus on lifestyle. People want to live better. That's the whole point. You want to live better, right? You want to live longer and live better. That's the whole point. So why starve yourself and suffer for something that's not worthy? So, but yeah, okay, so the next topic is interesting as well, because it's quite common for us to receive emails from people on the website, almost every day, whatever. But people say that they talk to their doctor about everything they have been reading on the website. We have been telling them that's okay, the science have been showing about high fat and low carb. Until they go to their doctors and they talk to them, or their nutritionists. And they come back and they tell us, okay, my doctor said that I should stop immediately following a high-fat, low-carb diet, right? And we know that that's true. It's a big challenge for us because we try to disseminate good information, but then we have the opposite force, the doctors, which should be the ones we should believe in, right? So I want to, what do you think, Dr. Andreas? How do you think it will become better? How do you think we can help to instruct these doctors so that they can be more updated about recent modern nutrition and real facts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the thing that could help the most, I think, is when people do try low carb and they come back to their doctor and they lost 20 pounds and their diabetes is vanished. I mean, you can't see any problems with the blood sugar and people feel better, and they tell their doctor that they did a low carb, high fat diet. I think maybe the first person who comes is just going to be, you know, the doctor won't believe it, but maybe the second time it's going to be harder not to start to think. And I think a lot of doctors, if they see that time after time, they will be curious and they will start to read the science, and then they will be converts.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Dr. Soto? Because you also deal with patients every day.
This is a very real problem, and it is amazing the state of denial that some doctors live in, because sometimes many patients show up with all sort of health improvements, and still the doctor will grab to that single marker that has gone bad, be it LDL or whatever. Okay, so the person is like 20 kilos leaner, is exercising, is feeling much better, is better in every way possible. But then, you know, you run a 20 blood tests, and one of them gets worse, even though many got better. And then people grab to that single one. And I believe it is out of fear, you know. If you believe what you do is healthy, then that single test is just a fringe result. But if you believe what you are doing is wrong because everybody tells you it's wrong, then that single test is proof that you are doing something that is bad for you.
Well, that's just confirmation bias, right? That's how humans work.
Exactly.
But I imagine you also get a lot of controversy, or not controversy, but a lot of resistance from readers on your blog, right? I get a lot of in my blog, and I'm not even a nutritionist, but I know that probably a lot of people read your blog. Actually, your blog is one of the most read, I think, in Sweden, right? I was impressed about the amount of people that visit your blog. It's very good information there. I'm going to put the link below here, the video later. But I want to know, so do you receive a lot of bad feedback or a lot of resistance?
Yeah, once in a while. I mean, sure. I think the big, maybe some people who are vegans for ethical reasons or environmental reasons or whatever, they're often very, very convinced that eating animals is gonna make people, I don't know, die or something. So that could be one group that is sort of doesn't like the message on my blog.
Yeah, one of the problems, I think, is that there are a lot of very poorly carried scientific studies, because we basically can prove everything if we see things in a certain perspective, right? So a lot of scientific studies, they actually are founded by interests, right? So a lot of people actually post some links, like a study associating mortality with fat intake, for example, and they try to argue that. So that's a problem, I think. I think when you have a lot of bad science published, you can actually fire up people. They can have more arguments, although it's, we know that's not true, but it can actually make it more difficult for us to actually prove the point.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that there are so many studies out there that's based on observational data, meaning statistical correlations, where they send up surveys for people and they fill out what they ate, and then they follow them for 10 or 20 years, and then they find some correlations, and then this is reported in the media like a fact, like a truth that the other day it was that people who skipped breakfast increased the risk of heart disease by 27%. Only people who ate at night had the opposite reaction. So they had like 55% increased risk of heart disease. So sort of somewhere around 3 or 4 a.m. the food sort of gets the opposite effect. I don't know.
That's
but
very
the problem is that these sort of statistical correlations are basically false 80 to 90% of the time on average. And still it's reported like a fact in the media, and I think that's one of the big problems.
Yeah, I think every time someone mentions to me a study, and the study says this is actually associated with this, I say there's a very big chance that's wrong, right? You can associate a lot of cause and effect, but you never see the fact behind it.
It could be wrong 85% of the time, and if you look at all these associations and believe in them all, then there will be basically nothing you can eat, nothing you can do that's not going to increase your risk of dying.
You know, that's why I think having a ancestral template, a evolutionary template, helps to sort things out. Because you know, it's like if you have a puzzle, a jigsaw, and you have to put all the pieces together. It is much easier if you have a picture of what you are expecting, you know, than just trying to fit all the pieces by trial and error. So, I mean, it just does not make sense that refined flour or refined sugar that's not been around during our evolution would be good for us, and it does not make sense that animal fat would be bad for us since we've been eating it like forever. You know?
Yeah, even though they keep praying this philosophy that you should eat less fat and you should eat your carbs or whatever, even though they have been praying this very, very hard during the last decades, we see the obesity numbers. I think it's very clear that obesity is going up and up. It's in Brazil as well, it's very worrisome, I would say. So it's going up and up. And people are even trying to follow the guidelines. That's why it's sad. People are becoming more conscious about health, and they try to follow these guidelines. But for some reason, it's just not working, right? It's just not working. The numbers still are going up. So I think it's very sad, the situation.
It's a complete disaster. I mean, millions of people are dying every year because of this mistake, I believe. Because they get diabetes, they get heart disease, they get cancer, and I mean, hundreds of millions of people are getting obese all over the world, I believe, because of this mistake.
But Dr. Andreas, they are eating more whole grains, healthy whole grains, aren't them?
Yeah, I think, I mean, having whole grains is like putting filters on your cigarettes.
Yeah, right. That's a good comparison. And even worse, I mean, these people, when, well, where they can ask for help, right? They go to their doctor, they go to their nutritionist asking for help. They want to lose weight, they want to improve their health, and they are given this advice that they should eat less and still eat lean meat, whatever, everything. But they still fail. They just fail in their diet. It just doesn't work. And they are called, like, they lack willpower, for example. They are lazy because they don't stick to it. They don't have commitment to their goal. I think that's really incredibly unfair to these people. So they leave with the problem of obesity. They go to the doctor, get the guidelines. It just doesn't work. They go back. They're blamed because they lack willpower. And so they live their whole life with that problem.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, most of the Western world, and I'm sure in Brazil as well, most of Europe, most of America, people are overweight or obese. I mean, the majority of the people, and we're going to blame it on lack of willpower. We're talking about the majority of the population, and this is a recent problem. It's just in the last 30 years or something. Why did the majority of the population suddenly lose their willpower? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and it is strange because if you look at a graph of diabetes or weight problems, you know, the willpower just vanished in 1977.
Yeah, right. Coincidence.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's quite a coincidence.
Yeah. People became less committed.
One of the interesting things about it is that two of the most common arguments you have there on your blog, one is about the ethical reasons. I think there's a lot that can be done to diminish that. But the other one about the environmental issues, I think in the longer term, in the bigger picture, it is the right way to go. You mean the first step a person takes is changing their diet. The second step is changing the quality of their food, and that leads them to organic foods, and that leads like local and local producers that will. It's much more sustainable in the long term, right?
Sure. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about the low-carb diet is that it's a very, very high protein diet, which, as I'm sure we all know, is not true. It's not the right way to do it. You need to increase the fat.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
And the amount of protein could be basically the same as for other people. We don't need a lot of protein. We don't need to eat a lot of meat. Just need to eat the proper amount.
And it's very difficult as well. If you want to eat a lot of meat, it's very difficult. It's not easy to overeat protein. And we talked about it previously with Dr. Soto, right? You can talk more about it, Dr. Soto.
Yeah, I mean, this is not something new. Dr. Yudkin has published a paper in the 70s showing that a low-carb and a high-carb diet are essentially the same in terms of protein. In the beginning of the 20th century, we had Dr. Stephenson, right? The one that went to the pole with the Eskimos, and they had this very interesting experiment in which he consumed lean meat for a couple of days and became ill, and once you put the fat back, then he got better. So this is nothing new. You cannot overeat protein, so it is not a high protein diet. And you know, Dr. Andres, I am a urologist. So many people ask me if the diet is bad for the kidneys, you know, because it is a high protein diet, etc. So it is not high protein, and even if it's a little higher protein, there is not a single study showing that this would be bad for the kidneys, unless you have kidney failure, right? So. But these myths are just so widespread that a lot of doctors will tell patients this, even though there is not a single paper supporting this.
Yeah, we know what's really bad for kidneys, right? Is eating a very high carb diet and getting diabetes.
Oh yeah, that's great for kidneys and hypertension also.
Yeah.
It's a very good recipe for disaster.
You know, in actuality, one of the best predictors of kidney stones is metabolic syndrome. Okay, so overweight patients with pre-diabetes, this is the profile of a patient that has kidney stones. So it always obviously makes sense that if you do a low-carb, high-fat diet and bring this patient to a healthy weight and cure his metabolic syndrome, his stones will go away.
That's very interesting. I never read about it. It's very cool to know. Let me ask you, Andreas, what are the most common results that you observe in your patients when you follow up with them in a low-carb intervention?
Okay, I think there are 4 results that are more common than others, and the first one is obviously weight loss, and a lot of people are obviously doing low carb to lose weight, and most people do. The second one is improvement in diabetes, improvement in blood sugar control. I can see it in every single patient I think I've ever had who's gone on a low carb diet. They all improve their blood sugar. And the third one is actually stomach issues going away, like gas and bloating and cramps and some cases of diarrhea. A lot of people get rid of their lifelong stomach problems, like irritable bowel syndrome. It's kind of interesting, I think. And the fourth one is people who have a difficult time with sugar cravings. That tends to go away as well.
Yeah, do they report more about how they feel as well?
Yeah, a lot of people feel a lot better. I mean, but that's usually people who didn't feel that great before. I mean, if you feel great and then you go on a low carb diet, I don't know, maybe you're still gonna feel great. It's not gonna make that big of a difference. But if you're obese and you have diabetes and you have loads of medicines, and then you can perhaps lose the excess weight and you can get rid of quite a few medications. Yeah. A lot of people feel like new people. They feel like they lost 20 years or something.
Yeah, one big thing that you also mentioned was the sugar craving. That's a big thing for a lot of people. They just think they can't live without sugar. So I want to know what you observe. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure they go to you and they start a low carb approach, and they are haunted by this sugar craving, right, in the beginning maybe. But then what do you usually observe, and what's the period of time that people suffer the most with that, and when they actually get rid of it, this very strong taste for sugar? How does it work in your day-to-day practice?
Yeah, I think most people, if they do a well-formulated low-carb diet with enough fat so they're not hungry, they lose most of their sugar cravings in perhaps 2 days. Although there is a subgroup of people who are truly addicted to processed foods and sugar and so on, and that doesn't really go away in 2 days. It's like if you're an alcoholic, you can stay away from alcohol, and the urge to drink sort of reduces, but it's not going to go away for a long time. And it's sort of similar when it comes to sugar and junk food, like smoking or drinking alcohol. If you're really addicted, it's going to take a long time, but you're still going to get rid of the worst sort of cravings in a few days.
So if they hang in there in the beginning, they have a brighter future.
Yeah, it gets easier with time. Sure. Yeah,
I think that's very important to mention, because people really suffer about the sugar cravings. We hear about it very, very often in the blog. So when they try to go low carb, they just miss bread. Basically, Brazil, they eat a lot of bread in Brazil. It's crazy, and a lot of sugar as well. So the habit that you have of eating these foods, so the habit's a problem, and the actual addiction that you create in your system is also a problem. So if they hang in there and they apply a correct low carb approach, things will become easier to follow up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For most people, if it's a habit, or it gets easier with time, and I think most people don't have that big of a problem getting rid of carbs. It's just a habit, sort of, and it gets easier once you get into a new habit. But if you're truly addicted, it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I have a question for you, Andres. Usually, what happens in your experience to the blood lipids of patients, and do you think that blood lipids are actually really important in terms of predicting disease?
Yeah, what happens basically the same thing that happens in studies where you test low carb. You get the total cholesterol might go up a little bit in the beginning on average, but mostly it's the good cholesterol, the HDL, that goes up proportionally the most, and the triglycerides go down, which is all good things. And then the LDL value might rise a little bit, at least in the beginning. But I'm sure we all know that if you look closer at the LDL particles, you get larger and fluffier, sort of more benign LDL particles at the same time. So I would say if you look closely at the blood lipids, all of them improve basically.
You correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But it seems to be that low HDL is a very good sign that could predict heart disease. And we see the low carb approach actually increase HDL. So the attention on LDL seems to be not that important as you believe it to be. But HDL, I mean, if you have a low HDL in your blood, I think it's a very good sign that you're eating a lot of carbs, and you actually can have some increased risks. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the markers for metabolic syndrome, and it's often connected to high blood pressure, abdominal obesity, high triglycerides, and pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. So absolutely, it's definitely a big risk marker for all that.
You know, I think the focus on LDL is just a derivative of the fact that we have good drugs to lower it.
Yeah.
So if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if we had some drug that could make HDL higher, surely people would talk more about it. But since you know, we have a diet, a lifestyle, which is a low carb, high fat diet that does it, and you know, this doesn't make money for industry. So I'm convinced that the focus on LDL is a marketing thing.
Yeah.
Actually, low carb, it doesn't make money for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. But anyways, I think a lot of people say that, okay, low carb, but then how will people in the world survive? Because we're going to lack food, whatever. Well, if we don't change that, we're all going to die, right? So we don't have no future anyway. So I think we need to adapt. Just need to adapt. We need to. People are getting sick and people are dying earlier, even though we have so modern medicine out there to try to patch and fix this consequence, these problems we have. I think the future is definitely not bright if we continue the same track. So,
no.
So that's a bit sad. So it's a lot of arguments against it as well, but I think we can talk about for days. But anyways, I'm going to go follow up here for the second, two last questions of our agenda today. And the one that I want to ask now to Andreas as well, what are the concepts of a low-carb approach that create the most resistance in your patients?
Yeah, I think people miss certain kinds of food, and I think in Sweden it's probably bread could be number one, perhaps, and fruit could be number two. So giving up that kind of food is what's hardest, I think, for the largest amount of people. Yeah,
I think here in Norway, if you take bread out, they're going to starve and die. they really I think they're very conscious about healthy lifestyle here, well, way more than in Brazil, I'm sure. But they eat their bread, okay, but they don't eat that much sugar as compared if we compare to Brazil and other countries. So that's why they're not as obese or as overweight as other countries. And I think the same kind of applies to Sweden, isn't that true?
Excuse me, what's the question?
No, the Swedes, as the Norwegians, the Scandinavians in general, they're becoming more conscious about a healthy food habits, right? And so even though they eat bread, okay, that's not healthy, you know that, but they don't eat as much sugar as other countries, as U.S. and Mexico, even Brazil, right? So I think it's very good they're becoming more conscious, and that's why I think people here in Scandinavia are healthier and thinner than other parts of the world.
Yeah, possibly, but I do think that a lot of Swedes are eating quite a lot of sugar and drinking it too. So maybe less than in the US, but it's not that good.
No, I don't think anywhere in the world we can say it's good. That's a bit sad. But okay, that's good. So now the last question. I think a lot of people would like to know the answer for this one. It's a kind of tricky question, of course, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If a person is overweight, okay, unhappy with their body and with how they feel, and they are still following a traditional diet at this moment, but they want to start to change, what would be the number one tip you have to this person as the first thing to do to start with the right food, losing weight and living better?
Well, if I have to pick only one thing?
Yeah, like the first thing you would advise.
Yeah, the first thing I would say, don't drink sugar, meaning no soda, no fruit juice.
Very interesting. Dr. Soto, I want to know the same thing from you.
I would pick bread and wheat. Just take that out.
Okay, I think very both of them are very very big changes. I think not drinking soda and juice, maybe it's a bit easier to implement for people. But I think both of them are really, really important. Actually, they should do both, of course. But as the first thing, then you think sodas and fruit juice. That's another thing people complain about. How come fruit juice can be bad? A lot of nutritionists, they suggest you should eat more fruit, you should drink more juice, right? But then we know that it's not the best thing if your focus is on living better and losing weight. And the same thing about wheat, right? So it's kind of a tricky position. I think everybody is. They don't know where to run to get good information about it. So
it'd be a hard thing. Find good information online because there's so much out there. It's hard to know what to trust, I guess.
Yeah, I'll tell them what to trust. I'll tell them to go to your website, for example, that I know it's very good information, it's very trustworthy. So they should go to, his website is www.dietdoctor.com. I'm going to leave the link below. I recommend everybody to go there and have a look. Of course, it's in English. If you speak Swedish, it has the Swedish version as well, but I think most of the people speak English or they don't. So I highly recommend to visit there, and I highly recommend as well as always to visit Dr. Soto's blog as well, and both links are going to be under the video here. So I think we came to an end to our discussion today, to our agenda today. I think we really talked about very important information. If people really pay attention to this kind of stuff, and if they at least start thinking about it as a possibility of being right, that I think I'll be happy with the outcome of everything. So now I want just to thank you very much, Andreas, for your participation here. We really, really enjoyed it. Okay, I really know you're a busy person, and Dr. Soto, the same thing. I'm really honored to have you both here participating. I think the Brazilian people really can take a lot out of this conversation we are having here. So I really thank you, honestly, both of you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Very good.
Thank you, Andreas. It's a great moment for us here in Brazil. Dr. Soto is going to be featured on a major magazine. Our website has a lot of visitors, and it's great that they will be able to know you and your work, and a person of your knowledge and stature. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now I'm going to wrap up with a Portuguese ending for our video. So I'm going to go for it, okay? Então, pessoal, como a gente viu aqui, voltando para o português, a informação está aí, tá? Eu acho que os fatos estão aí. Cabe a você ouvir isso e digerir da forma que você preferir. Enfim, a informação está aí. Eu realmente espero que você reflita um pouco sobre isso e leia mais no blog do Dr. André, no blog do Dr. Soto, no emagrecer-de-vez.com. Faça isso. Como você sabe, também tem obviamente, como eu sempre falo, o livro eletrônico oficial do Emagrecer-de-vez.com, que você pode ir lá e ver, é uma forma fácil de você aplicar na prática todos esses hábitos, tá? Emagrecer-de-vez.com/livro, lá você vê o material e tudo mais. E eu acho que, enfim, a gente está falando da tua saúde, tá? A gente está falando da tua saúde, e quando o assunto é saúde, acho que a coisa mais importante do mundo, realmente para todo mundo, é a saúde. Então, eu realmente recomendo que você preste atenção em tudo isso que a gente fala e siga, tá? Siga aqui o site, se inscreva aqui no canal do YouTube para seguir os próximos episódios também, tá? Então eu quero agradecer a todo mundo pela atenção, já agradeci aos dois ali pela participação dos doutores, agradeço o Josh também pela disponibilidade. Eu acho que a gente vai fechando o episódio de hoje aqui. Eu acho que foi muito legal e espero que todo mundo possa ter aproveitado mais, saber muito mais informação realmente verdadeira sobre saúde e nutrição, ok? Então, um abraço e até o próximo episódio, ok? Até mais.
Abraço. Tchau.
Audio Jungle.